British have decided that on their first activation with the Indians, because the officer is going to activate the Indians, so the first activation they're going to run. So we're now going to just process, so they're going to try and get across as much of this ground as they can towards the French infantry skirmishers over there. So they need high rolls to do this, and then we'll see what they want to do with their second activation. So we'll come down to the dice tray and see what we can. Okay, so here we go. Just roll 2 dice for running. It would be normally 1 dice for move, 2 dice for running. It will mean that they will have 1 point of shock put on them automatically. So here we go. That's quite good. It's actually 11 inches of movement. That might be enough to get them into actual contact with the Marines. Let's have a look and see, because I think when I measured it for the Brits it was about 11 inches. So here we go. Let's have a look and get the big stick and measure. So the Indians move forward 11 inches. They will indeed contact the Marines. So let's move them forward and put them into contact, like so. And they've made contact. Now the French officer has the option of running away, and I think in this case, otherwise the Indians would have contacted him. I don't think that the French officer would have been that enthusiastic about staying there, so it's actually an evade. So I think it's two dice of movement. I'll just make sure of that. I'll have to come back to that, so I'll end here and then come back to see what the evade. Right, so the French officer has the option to evade, which is 2d6, so we'll get down to that. So I'll come back down to the dice tray and we'll see how far back. Now he has to go directly back, so a roll of about 4, 5 would be great for me, and it's a 6, so let's see what a 6 will do and where that will place him. Hopefully it means that he'll be behind the French infantry and not off the table. So let's see, 6 inches. 6 inches back. Yeah, that puts him just behind the French infantry. So good for me if the French infantry are still hanging around at the end of this round. So let's see what the Brits want to do now. I've got a feeling they want to go into fighting, because the Indians are armed with tomahawks, so going in, it will mean that they can throw the tomahawks as they're going in, which will automatically give shock. Well, they throw 1d10 for each man that's in the unit, and for every 5 and 6 that will then give a shock to the unit that they're going into. So let's pause it there and give the Brits the good news. Right, so the Indians have charged across the open ground towards the French Marines. They had 11 inches to go. I missed that the Indians had already got a point of shock, so that actually reduced their movement by 1 inch. So they actually, even though they rolled an 11, they only moved 10 inches, so they're actually an inch short of contact with the French Marines. So the British have now decided that they want to close that inch gap, so it's their second activation. So they get 1 dice for the movement, but they've decided to spend the flag and do step out, so that will give them an extra dice, so they'll get 2 dice of movement. They've now got 2 points of shock on them because they got the 1 for running, so they actually need 3 or more to contact the French Marines in and get into hand-to-hand combat with them. So we'll move on back and down to the dice tray, where I will roll for the British movement. So 3 or more to make contact. And they get a 2, which means they fail. They stop short. It's amazing. The French have survived another turn. So we will now go to the drawing of another chit and see what happens. So I will get another chit out and see what that tells us. So mix them up, and out comes the chit, and it is British unit number 1, well, officer number 1, and the British officer number 1 is here just behind the British line, next to the British skirmishers. So we'll see what the British commanders want to do. So this is the position for the British line as requested. I'll just take it up a bit so you can see that the French are well over to the left. Come back down. Okay, the British have decided that with Officer 1 they're going to try and move their units in line. Now those units have got shock on. From left to right it's 2-2-1, but for the movement you only take the highest amount of shock on any one group, so they're going to have -2 to their movement, because the highest amount of shock on one unit is 2. So we'll go down to the dice tray and we'll see where they will end up after this roll. And they need high, and they've got a 1. So in fact they ain't going nowhere, I'm afraid. They stall where they are. The British line have done their first activation. They decided to move, but on the dice roll, because of the shock on the units, they failed to move. So the British have opted once again to try and move the line, wheeling it so they can get a better shot at the French line. So here we go. Let's see what the British can get this time. Now they've got 1 point of shot left on them for the movement, so they need above a 1 to get any movement, and it's 4, so they'll actually get 3 inches of movement. So I'll do the movement and The British have also said that they want to make sure that the officer goes with the unit because he's attached. So officer number 1 and that officer will take off 1 point of shock to finish the British move. So I'll do that, and then we'll come back for a roll on, a draw for the next chits. Okay. Right, so the British have moved 3 inches. So now I'll come down to the dice tray and draw out the next chit. So get the bag, fumble them around, and the next chit out is a blue flag. So that's 3 blue flags out, and fumble around to get the next one out. Will be a red flag, and fumble around for the next one, which is a red flag. So that means that 3 flags out in a row, something bad happens. So I need the rule book for that, and 2 dice I believe, and I'll come back and see what happens with that. Right, so we've got a random event as 3 flags pulled on the trot from the bag. So the last unit to do anything was the British line units, which was moving, so they've got a random move event. So I roll 2d6 and I'll look it up on the chart and tell you what is happening. It could be good, it could be bad, more likely bad. So we have a 6. So well, let's see. Step out, lads. The unit has a spring in its step. Unit may add 1 more d6 of movement immediately. Well, I don't know. That's good for the British, so they are going to be able to move 1 more d6 of movement, which I think for them will be to continue to wheel round so that they can bring more muskets to bear on the French. So let's see how much movement they've got, and we'll go from there. So 1d6, and it's a 5. So we'll stop there because there's a couple of things I need to think about, whether the shock counts with the extra movement, or whether it's going to be a straight move of 5 inches. So we'll come back to this. Good one for the British. So after a quick think, the British have actually moved the full 5 inches from their bonus move because they'd already used the penalty for the shock, and as it's all one, counted as all one move, so they'd already used the penalty. They'd already had the penalty of the 2 taken off their movement. So the British have had the full 5 inch of move, and that means that they are in a much better position to be able to get fire onto the French line. Just have a look at that, draw it back, and there you go. Right, the British have decided to use 2 flags to do sharp practice, which means that they can fire. So what they're actually going to do is, they're already loaded, so they will present and fire. So they're going to get a controlled volley at the French line. There's 22 men in the group that's firing, but they'll lose 1 dice because of shock, and they will need, because it's controlled volley, they will need 5 and 6s to hit. So here we go, 21 dice on 5s and 6s. So they've got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Let's check through that. Yeah, so they've got 10 hits. So we'll now see what damage they do with their 10 hits. So I'll just pick out 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 10 dice. Okay, so on 10 dice they are going to need, the French are in cover, all being light cover, so they'll need 6s for kills, 4 to 5s will be shock. So 6s for kills, 4 to 5 shock. And they have 1, 2, 3, 4 shock, 1 kill. That's quite a lot of shock, but only 1 kill. Okay, so the British line have opened up. I wouldn't say it was a devastating volley, but I think they've done enough damage to hamper the French a bit. The French in return are going to also do sharp practice, but because they're not loaded, that means that they can only reload their guns. So that's what the French will do. They'll use 2 flags to do sharp practice to reload their guns, and we will now go back down to the tray for the next draw and see what may come out of the bag. Now the British used their 2 flags because they think that the tiffin is going to come out very soon because there's not many chits left in the bag. So let's see what happens. And it is Red Officer 2. So Red Officer 2 is now going to be activated, and Red Officer 2 is there, and he is a leader 1. So that's Red Officer 2, and that's the units under his command. So it's the Rangers and the militia. Okay, so the British officer number 2 is going to activate the skirmishers. He's within 2 inches, so he's going to be attached, and they're going to move back to the tree line. So we'll just go down to the dice tray. So this will be the first activation. See how far they can go. Now they've got no penalties on them, they're just unloaded at the moment, so they can go back 5 inches, and that should get them just with the 1 activation into the woods. So we'll come back and have a look at that once I've moved them. Okay, so the skirmishers, the irregular skirmishers, have moved back into the tree line with the officer for 1 activation. The second activation, they've started to reload, hence the smaller cotton buds out there, to show that they've started that reload process, because with them being armed with rifles, it takes 2 activations for them to reload, unless they use sharp practice where they'll reload in one go. Okay, so we'll now go back down to the dice tray because we're going to draw another chit from the chit bag and see where we are. So by my calculations, there's not a lot left in there, so we'll just see what comes out. I'll just mix them up a bit and we will draw out, and it comes out and it's a red flag. So a red flag, and I'll draw the next one out, and the next one out is actually the tiffin. Okay, so what I'll do, because obviously we're doing this across the internet, the Americans can either choose to play the flag before the tiffin or after the tiffin. I think it'll probably be better after the tiffin, because that means they can activate a unit which hasn't already been activated. I don't think there's anything they could have done with the flag before the tiffin was drawn. So, but sorry, the British, must remember the British. So I will leave it there and let the British decide what they want to do. Okay, so the tiffin has come out. The British and the French have both got a flag each. The French can't do anything with theirs because all their units have actually done something in this round. The British are able to utilise their flag to activate the Rangers which are in shot here, and they have decided that they are going to move the Rangers back out of sight behind the building as much as possible. Now the Rangers have got 3 points of shock on them, so that means that there will be a penalty of 3 on their movement. So I would think it's probably going to take them at least 2 activations to move. They do get a free activation movement dice as well. So what I'll do is I'll use the first move activation, the free move activation, see where that puts them, and if they are then at a place where the British are in cover, if they've got their one of their normal activations left, that will be used to reload. Okay, so let's go down to the dice tray. The tiffin is, as you can see, and so these 2 dice are first activation, so normal movement plus the extra movement which skirmish troops can do, and that gives them 10 minus the 3 will take it down, minus 3 will take it down to 7 inches. Okay, so the Rangers have moved back 7 inches to just behind the lee of the wooden house. Now, being a fair-minded person, I've moved them to this position. They're going to use the last activation to reload, and they are actually in a position now where they can still fire at the French line because they're just in the maximum range, which is 18 inches, but they are covered from the French infantry. The French courrier de bois. So a good position for the British to be in.